Well, we are live here once again with Coffee with Humans with my new friend Hoyin. Welcome to Coffee with Humans.
Hey Jason, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be on.
Well, this is exciting. I know that you are nowhere near Chicago, Illinois, which is where I'm at. So we need to get a handful of things out of the way. First of all, to our viewers and listeners, I don't know you at all. We just met a couple of minutes ago. We did some tech checks and named this chat. Beyond that, this is our moment to get to know each other from around the world. Where are you located?
I'm right now in Hong Kong.
All right. Wow. Through the magic of technology, the wonders of the internet, we are connected in real time and then streaming. Not only are we connected to each other, but we're then streaming around to the rest of the world right now. So fascinating. You must be a techie sort of guy. Is that true?
Yeah. I am. I've been a techie since I was a kid. My dad was really into technology, and he bought me a first like Pentium 386 on DOS and playing games like black and white. So I started young for sure.
Yeah. Well, also welcome to Zach Stepik, giving us a hand clap here uh, for us just clicking this button to go live. So thanks for watching, Zach. Uh, I do have to get this out of the way as well. I'm always curious to know like, what inspired you to click the button to have coffee with me?
Yeah, when I looked at like your podcast and I looked at like a lot of things, all of your previous stuff that you've done, like it's a really authentic conversation. It's like not super structured. There's a lot of there's a lot of back and forth banter, like just like a normal conversation, which in a lot of podcasts it's like not necessarily that. It's just kind of like it's like you typically the host just interviews the person and then that's it. The other thing is that it's live. That's like you know, it's like SNL. You gotta do it's live. And I
So
just like that
that
component about it.
that intrigues you that it's live?
Yeah, because most of them are not. Most of them are not live. I've only done a very few that are live, and it just adds that extra component that like as if it's like you're doing a real show in front of other people. At like how we used to do before the pandemic. So it just has that sort of like quality to it, and I think that's just more authentic, more real.
Hmm. Well, that's good. I try. Well, we'll take the next 45 minutes or so to get to know each other. And again, the whole world is invited to this conversation. You're the title that you came up with, and I put you on the spot, I know, but I asked you to like name this chat. And you said you were talking about reclaiming authenticity or how to reclaim authenticity in online conversations or online events. I'm curious why that matters to you.
Yeah, before kind of like a project that I worked on before, it was like a SaaS product that helped small medium businesses to kind of grow their social media. And I did this for a lot of companies, a lot of influencers, and it's kind of like you work at McDonald's and you don't want to eat McDonald's anymore. It's kind of like that with social media, and what we see today in terms of the polarization, the echo chamber that we see today. Like I got a taste of that a while back, like definitely like 7, 8 years ago, and I saw that it was becoming more increasingly prevalent, and that people were not really talking to each other. They're just talking like at each other, but they're not really engaging um, in a really authentic way. And I could see that we were going towards what we've seen today and in a lot of our politics and discourse. And that made me realize that there has to be a better way. Like social media cannot be the only way, the way how we communicate online with technology. So that's why I became really passionate about that, because I just got this enchantment with social media.
Hmm. So you're talking about this idea of authenticity, and I'm curious. I've actually never looked up the definition of authenticity. It's a buzzword as far as I can tell in the past mm, 7 years, uh, and it's really coming to the surface now. I think I would guess, and it's only my experience, that like what you talk about, people having these conversations where they're talking at each other, but they're not talking with each other. Uh, what does authenticity mean to you, and how do you know when a conversation is authentic?
Yeah, I mean, to me, authentic. I really go back to I frequently think about this as like, what did humans do with in the absence of technology? I mean, we don't need technology and all this other stuff to do what the most human things that we do. Humans have been having authentic conversations for thousands of years. And
Hmm.
it's, sitting at a campfire, like one of your podcasts, like sitting at a bar, just meeting someone randomly and just learning about each other, being open and frank and nice and nice as in like just being able to be slightly transparent and open with each other to understand each other in a very respectful way, and and even at times be able to express each other's opinions and to acknowledge those opinions, acknowledge those differences, and that to me is like you get to see a person for who they are, and I think that's it, you don't have to go super deep into that because that's not that's not always the most appropriate thing to do, but you get to just it's just not just scratching the surface, it's just maybe a little bit below, and that is frequently enough to kind of have a good start to a meaningful relationship. It's a good next step, and really that's what it is. An initial authentic conversation is a start for a potential meaningful relationship that may blossom through that.
Interesting. So authenticity, by your description, is the start to a meaningful conversation and potentially meaningful relationship. That's what you
At
said?
least, eh, yeah, I mean, at least from when you're having a conversation during a short period of time,
Okay.
right? And you don't know the person. And obviously, if you do know the person and you're in the like, you would continue to have authentic conversations after the first meeting in order to further develop that meaningful relationship. So I would see that as like a way to get to that meaningful relationship part. It's like one of the not a tool, but it's like a necessary like a sort of like an experience that you need to do between two
Mhm.
people in order to get there.
I think I know what you're talking about. I tend to be on the end, and I've always been this way. Uh, I don't like small talk. It's difficult for me to hang with conversations that I attribute no meaning to, which is sometimes a bit of a fault for me because sometimes the meaningless things, or what I consider meaningless, are really the surfacey things that need to be discussed to get people warmed up to the idea that we might have a meaningful conversation and therefore a meaningful relationship. Do you think that where do you lie on that kind of meaningful conversations versus meaningless conversations and the use of them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So it's so funny because so I grew up in Illinois when I was 9, and then I moved back to Hong Kong, and
Okay.
then I came back to Hong Kong, came back to the States. I went to school in San Diego, in California, worked in the US. And like what's funny is that the moment that I came back from Hong Kong to the US, like I had like I speak, obviously like standard, American English, but from the cultural side, like I kind of forgot. I just didn't know. I did forget. And then there was this concept in that in America is like very prevalent is this small talk. Like you enter into an elevator, and you people will smile and say, "Hey, how's the weather going?" And that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen in Hong Kong or in Asian countries at all. If you say that, they will look at you and be like, like scurry away, like, oh my god, this guy's weird. Why are you talking to me? Um, so I think I don't think there's anything. Some people don't like stop mall talk, and I'd be like, yeah, I mean, of course, because it is in some cultures like it's just not normal. It's not. I wouldn't say it's not normal, but it's just not culturally what people do. People do feel awkward, like they actually do feel awkward in Asia when you have those conversations. So
Hmm.
I don't think meaningless is necessarily like I do think that's a fair statement that there's a lot of different ways to have conversations, and a lot of different cultures may not necessarily have that. I think though, from an American standpoint, from American culture standpoint, I think like meaningless conversation is essentially an icebreaker. But it's like, if you're in an elevator and clearly you guys are not going to continue the conversation, right? Or you're in a situation where that's what I feel like, where it may become not as meaningful, because then you're making an investment on something where you know that you're not gonna see this person ever again. And I think that I think meaningless conversation, as long as there's an end sort of like goal that's worth investment on, that might be worth it, maybe.
Hmm. So the small talk thing, you kind of see that as an icebreaker to some degree. I'm sort of the same opinion that small talk is basically an icebreaker. I get frustrated when people can't get a little deeper than that, and I know that people have all
Yeah,
sorts of barriers to, and
yeah.
sometimes I've got barriers to what I would consider something more valuable or meaningful. Um, but I wonder where in your experience did you develop this need or radar maybe for meaningful or authentic conversations?
Yeah, I mean, so um and when I was working on my previous project, and it was a SaaS software where we helped companies grow their social media. And I worked with I created a team. The company that I created, the team was fully remote. And this was remote, so we were doing remote work maybe 6, 7 years before the pandemic. So it was remote work was just a fringe thing. Like, just some people just were really, really crazy and passionate about. Now that everyone does it. And back then, when I worked with people, like, we there wasn't that much video call. Like, it was mostly chat, and like video calling was just, it was Skype back then mostly. And then and I found that I started losing some people, as in like they left the company, and I would ask them why, and they said, I just don't feel connected with the people that I work with. And that's when I started thinking about, like, why is this happening, and what was lacking. And what I felt was lacking was that you're just chatting with them through text. How human is that? And I felt that doesn't sound very human to me, to just chat with people, and neither did they, or otherwise they wouldn't have left. And so then I started to think, okay, what is the definition of an authentic conversation? And so we then started to think about creating events, creating online events, and creating like these online like virtual office spaces where people can kind of like sit in this like 2D like office layout, and maybe you might run into someone and like have this like conversation, like those natural collisions that happen. We were trying to like, and that's when it kind of started. And then when I then realized is that an authentic conversation, really, if you can get one, is really that's the foundation for a meaningful relationship that you could potentially have, if if the stars align and things, and people kind of feel that there's value in that. And so that's when I started to like piece together that it was actually from more of like a workspace angle that I was thinking about that. And then it wasn't until later that I started to develop this like vision concept, which is creating authentic conversations that drive meaningful relationships. And I realized that those are two really interlinked. And then like in 2019, um, we tried to basically, back then, the virtual office space that we created, no one bought it. No one bought the virtual office product that we created, even though I talked to people, I validated it. And then um, and then one day, like, I was trying to partner with this one company that was doing remote work, sort of an event, like a virtual summit for remote work. So I was like, okay, let's create a special map that's 2D, where people can jump from one table to the next, and for excuse me, for this virtual summit. Back then, they weren't called virtual events; they were called virtual summits. and let's just see, let's try to sell the virtual office product to them. They would experience it. And what's funny is that no one bought it. Like, it was 10,000 people across 3 days. No one bought the virtual office product, but they were all like, wow, this virtual event, this 2D space where I can move around, jump around tables. What is this? I want to host an event in here today. Can I host an event with you guys right now? And I said, well, we're not, we didn't design it that way. Actually, it's not a product for virtual events, it's for virtual office. And so that was when I started to think about what is the best way to achieve that goal of authentic conversations and meaningful relationships. And what I realized is that events are actually an even better way to do that, to convey, to do that. Because in an office, you're just working with people. That doesn't necessarily allow you to create it. Yes, you can create great relationships at work, but how do you scale that? And I realized that events is actually a much more better way to do that. And that's kind of how I started to like dive deeper in it and get into the more social aspect of it. And what in an online video, what defines a great conversation through online video, and then start digging deeper into that.
Yeah, so the event thing, it seems to me that one of the differences with an event is the impermanence of it. It is a finitely timed moment. So I go for a purpose. I know there's an ending to it, and so I engage very tactically in that moment. Whereas if you know that you're just going to see these people tomorrow, there's no reason that there's no what's the word I'm looking for? My words are failing me today. Uh, the word is I don't know. What's come on, man, help me out with the word when something's going to come to an end.
I don't know. Impending conclusion.
Yeah, something like that,
uh,
right? Exactly. Like it's going to come to an end. And that is a motivator to get things done. So if I knew that I had to make a connection, or if I was there to make connections, I would know I've got a timeline to do that in. And the old adage of work expands to fill the time allotted.
right.
Again, if I just know I'm going to see these people week in, week out, then there's no reason to no reason to hang around in that virtual environment. Shout out to Bob Groves here. Thanks for watching, sir. We're talking about authentic conversations, reclaiming authenticity in online events and in this virtual world where we've been thrust into it. And I mean, I don't know, there's a benefit to it, right? To connect with people around the world, but how do you do that authentically? Now, this idea of in-person versus virtual, I think that, I mean, to your point of like, how long has this thing been going on? This idea of connecting virtually is new to the vast majority of the population. And we were thrust into it because of COVID, but
Right.
you and we've been doing virtual stuff for years and years and years. I was doing video conferencing back, when I was one of the, had some of the faster internet in town. So this is not new to me, but
Right.
it is sort of, it's mind boggling, I think, to a lot of people. I wonder though, back to this idea of, authentic relationships or building deeper conversations. Is that easier in person, or is it easier virtually? Because if I'm wondering, because having an in-person conversation, there's so many more layers to it, and it's almost like an energy you can feel to be in the
Right.
presence of someone else that you just simply don't
Absolutely.
get in a virtual environment. So what are your
Absolutely.
observations?
Absolutely. You're 100% right. I call it the invisible filter. It's a
Okay.
filter. So, like, when you see someone on a video, you can see them move, they're moving, but for some reason there's this invisible filter where I don't feel your presence as a person. For some reason, you could make the the screen really big. I can see you there. There's something that it's not working. There's something that's not being communicated, whether it's body or nonverbal communication. Um, Virtual events can't replace that at the moment in terms of the current technology. Maybe in the future, don't know, but it definitely cannot. Um, but and to me, I think I wouldn't want it to replace in-person live events, because there's clearly something that is very, very human, and that should be kept. That should be very, very well kept. And in my opinion, it makes it more special. It makes it more cherished when you do have those opportunities to meet someone in person. Um, to me, what virtual events really do is that if when people think about events and going to meet someone, or it's either a 0 or a 1, meaning like you either go to the event or you don't go at all, right? And I got my kids, I got to take care of my dog. I can't go. It's just too much for me to go fly over like halfway across the country, or and then try to like attend this event. And some people, it just doesn't fit that. For those types of situations, you're not it's not like yes or no. It's now become a spectrum. Like, I can now attend the event for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I can attend it 5 minutes at the beginning, 5 minutes at the end. It doesn't really matter. And that to me has attracted a very different type of audience that you would never been able to have attracted or talked to if it was just in-person physical events. So to me, I think that's like the key. That's like the key difference, is that the audience is different. There's more like it's more of like your old way of doing things was, or previous way of doing things before COVID, was I could only have an event and talk to 100 people. Now it's 100 of those people plus maybe 500 more that they would never have attended anyways. But now they can get a taste of this event in a much more in a way that's more appropriate, in a way that's more appropriate for them. So to me, it's like an expansion play. It's like a scaling play for virtual events.
Okay, so this piggybacks off something that I heard recently. That don't remember. It's probably in the past 2 or 3 weeks that I heard somebody talking about the idea of people they could never get meetings with before. They could never get an in-person meeting with, but now they can now get like a 5 or 10 minute or 15 minute virtual, virtual meeting with them.
Right.
They'll happily video
Yeah.
conference, because whoever that individual is, they're just simply not going to give up, an hour and a half of their time to have you come over to their office, and they're certainly not going to go to yours, but they will hop on for a short video call. It seems to me there's that end of the spectrum, and then I think what I'm hearing you talk about is the soundbite folks, the testers, the people who, I'm not going to commit 2 days to your event, but I will commit to the hour long seminar that you're going to host on day and a half in. Or I just want to watch your keynote, or just catch the highlight reel. Is that kind of what you're thinking about in this idea of expansion
Yeah.
plays?
Yeah. Expansion play. But not only that, like there's a lot of platforms out there. One of them, including ours as well, is like you can now also network properly
Mm.
now online. So a lot of people, at least 50 to 60% of the people who go to events are actually there just not really for the content. They're actually there to meet people, to understand what's the industry trend, what's going on, want to get educated. So if they get a chance to do that, they don't even sometimes don't even attend the events, the keynotes or the speaking events. So it allows them to kind of like do that as well. And I think that is something where you kind of bring back the humanity to that, because you're not just like sitting there passively just absorbing information. You can actually interact, and it can be done now. And this is
Yeah,
relatively newer.
that's my experience as well with in-person events. A lot of, I don't know what percentage it would be, but a good percentage of the energy in that event is directed around all of the non-specific event things, like
Yeah,
sitting having lunch with people, or hey, let's go out for
yeah,
dinner. let's go out for drinks
Right.
and let's get to know one another. And in the context of, I know you on a business level, or I want to meet you on a business level, but I need to know you personally as well to be able to
Right.
connect in
Exactly.
a way that enables us to do business.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole idea of you do
Exactly.
business with people you know, like, and trust. How do you know, like, and trust people if it's just transactions all the time? And I
Right.
think there is a craving, because we're people, because we are wired the way we are. We need to
Yep.
have proximity, uh, relational proximity, and that has to develop through conversation.
Right.
And when we don't have something in person, we have to rely on this virtual world. And then how do we do that best? When we don't have that in-person energy.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that this replaces the in-person energy, but it definitely helps it, which is
Mhm.
through authentic conversation. If you're able to have some sort of authentic conversation online through video stream, I can see you. I can at least like understand where you're coming from and hear from you. I can look at your LinkedIn and get a better sense of who you are, and then leading to another conversation that isn't 100% there, but it's a certain percentage there. Don't know how much it is. Could be 30, could be 40, could be 60. Don't know what it is, but it's partially there. And because there's so many people that are now more comfortable with video, they're able to create relationships now, um, with just video, and that's a huge step. I mean, that's a really really big step. It's not like, oh, I just met someone on Match.com, and I don't know this person, and now we're dating. Like, before there was this huge stigma around online dating, right? Like, oh my gosh, you just met someone online. How do you trust this person? Da 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 da. Like, but now it's like you can meet people online if you see them and through their video. Like, it's not as scary as it used to be. It's just it is something where I think people are getting more used to.
Yeah. So you said you lived in Illinois?
Yeah, I grew up in small town called Bloomington Normal. I don't know if you know. It's in the middle of the state.
Yes. It's 2 hours south of me.
Yes, it is. It's 2 hours south. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've traveled quite a bit. Have you been using this idea of virtual connection for forever?
I mean, like, only in the past, maybe like since 2012, 2013 is when I started to like really understand it. Because before that, I did not like, it wasn't really on my radar. It wasn't until I was working with people remotely. I worked in San Francisco for a bit for like a consulting company, and I was traveling around a lot. And the consulting company that I was at, like, I would barely see any of my colleagues. They were all at their own client sites. We would travel
Right.
to the client site on Monday, fly back on Thursday, that kind of thing. And so that was essentially a remote company already pre-pandemic, back in like, 2010 or whatever. And so I started to like like, get on conference calls, get on video calls. I was already starting to do that. Um, and that kind of like was like the primer in me understanding like video and technology and how to use it for communication at like Fortune 5, like at large companies. And so I think like that was really the starting point. And before that, I really didn't really, um, yeah, it wasn't something that was on my mind even. But that's when I started to kind of like get more into it.
Did you feel a level of disconnection working remotely, just being at client sites and having all of your colleagues being at their client sites?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many nights where like you're just sitting by yourself in the bar and just drinking, and you know as talking to someone next to you at the bar, or talking to the bartender. Like, that's the amount of human, aside from the people with the client, which are great people, but like at night, you're just sitting by yourself. Like, that's the human connection that you have. Now, on the flip side, I when I came back, I went to Taiwan for a period of time for the birth of my son, and then I went back to Hong Kong in March, and I've had a 2-week quarantine. And during that
Hmm.
2 week quarantine, I was like talking to people online and going to events and doing like I was just like, wow, like I don't feel that lonely. Like I don't feel that lack of social interaction as I used to have when I was traveling because I now had this window that I could talk to people before like there wasn't really a window.
Hmm.
And so that I found really interesting that even during a quarantine, I could still maintain that level of social interaction, even though it's not in person. It's not the most I, highest quality, but
Right.
it was acceptable because it was quarantine.
I remember using meetup groups during the pandemic. There are some meetup groups in the region, and they would do like Friday happy hour. They would have a game like some game night. Everybody comes in to play some game, and I'm not a big board gamer or anything like that, but it was trying to recreate the things that would happen
Mm,
in person, but doing it very creatively,
yeah,
online. I
right,
mean,
right.
on an online happy hour, it's kind of fun because you go to your own kitchen, you get your own glass of wine or whatever,
Yeah,
and then you sit in front of your computer, and then people just sit there and banter back and forth for an hour and a half or whatever.
yeah,
It's an interesting dynamic. What it misses in in and what I miss from like a regular happy hour is you can in a traditional happy hour you can walk in and there's the big the idea of the bigger group, and then you kind of scan, you
right.
can figure out who and you go, glad hand to meet, hey, shake hands and say, hey, it's great to see you, and then you can develop a more intimate connection with a smaller group of people and break that off and continue. It's harder to do that in an online
It
environment
is.
because everybody's on a Zoom call, everybody's on the call, and then if you're
Yeah,
it's almost like if one person's talking, it's almost like you were to like walk up on a stage, and then 15 of your of your not very close friends
yep,
are all staring at you as
yep,
you give a speech for a moment, and
yep.
it
Weird.
misses the fluidity of interaction
It's
that
weird. Yeah,
that you get in a traditional happy hour. But it's an interesting
yeah.
proxy, at
So
least.
yeah. So I did a lot of like thought about this and like what when you think about like how people talk, and I think everyone sees this, like everyone knows this, right? Which is keep when you have a group of eight, or usually it's like about five or six or more, groups start to break off and they have their own conversations. It's a very natural thing. And the magic number is between four and six people per group per conversation. That's like the tip. Like that's like the maximum that you could have.
How do you
Ideally,
mean? Break that.
it's
What do you mean? There's the magic number is 4 to 6.
so a conversation is most healthy around four to six people.
Hmm.
Like that, it won't break off as easily into further down. Like for it to break off further down is that I really have really big interest, like say me and you were talking in a group of four, six, and either we have a really big interest or there's something else that's connecting us, and like we really want to break off from the group, and that or something else is at play. We're not interested in the topic, for example. But at four to six is like that kind of magic number where like things seem okay, like you can still talk to each other and things seem all right. And then anything that's above six or seven, like six, seven, eight, nine, 10, it then becomes an audience. It's not a
Hmm.
conversation. It's like an audience now. It's like I'm talking to a group of people. Like you then it starts to look like, hey, my name is Hoyin and I really like dogs. And it starts to become like that a little bit. And that's when people who are like, that starts the small talk uncomfortableness starts to kick in. And so what we realized was that the most intimate conversations and the greatest time when people have those intimate conversations that can drive a relationship forward that lead to authentic conversations. Here's the thing, like authenticity, right? Me just talking to a group of seven or eight, nine, 10 people, like, is that authentic? And in this case, what I mean by authentic is like, is that human? Does it feel like we would do this if we were at a bar? Maybe for a short period of time, but not the whole time, right? Not the whole full hour, right? Of time we were there. And so that's where we realized, okay, it needs to be broken up into several conversations. And
Yeah.
that's some of the research and some of the testing that I did in order to kind of like figure out what that means and how do we translate that into the experiences that we create at Remo. But like that 4 to 6 is what we've seen. I mean, ideally it should be smaller. Like it needs to be around 2, 3. That's like really like the real sweet spot where that's obviously the smaller, the more authentic and the more higher chance those relationships get. But when you're at an event, you don't like it's things are going so fast, you're talking to so many people, like so typically events don't get that small. Those people meet a lot of people, and then the next step is, as you know, is hey, I want to get your LinkedIn. Can we have a one-on-one at another time? So people would push those like maybe at a time afterwards. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it's what you said is I really agree wholeheartedly is that there's this big group and then there's a bunch of small groups, and that's actually the typical healthy structure. No, I wouldn't say it's healthy, but it's a good structure for more successful, um, more the typical gatherings. Yeah.
I think it creates a bit of variety to allow a person to blend in anonymously with a larger group, but then to be known by a smaller group. The one thing there's a thought that comes to my mind when you're talking about this idea of 4 to 6 people, and you said this, you made mention of, well, there's got to be a good attraction or something like that to the topic. Like we really have to connect on a certain topic to be able to break away from the smaller group. And I wonder, um, just due to the way we're wired, it's neither a positive nor a negative. It's just in smaller groups, we tend to become socially bound into that group. If I'm in that group, it's hard for me to walk away. It's hard for me to say, okay, bye, good night. Or it would be even harder, for 2 people in a group of 5, let's say, to break away and say, you 3 over there, we're not
Yeah.
interested in what you're talking
Yeah.
about. We're going to go over here.
Yeah.
If you had to have that moment, that defining moment in the conversation, very few people would be able to do that because there's a
Exactly.
magnetism and a
Yeah.
social responsibility to stay part of
Right.
the group when the group is smaller.
Exactly.
And I love the idea
Exactly.
of then thinking about this idea of value, the conversation to break that conversation away, the value has to increase beyond the value of social
Exactly.
responsibility to be able to separate the group.
Exactly. 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 That's exactly like I I have to feel like, wait, I really need to talk to you about this. I may not get another chance. Hey, can I just, get your car? Can we talk? Hey, I think we could really collaborate here. Like the it's there's like graceful ways to kind of do that, but you're right. Like there's a lot of etiquette that's involved. Um, and what's funny is that in digital online conversations, because there's this filter, and that filter causes people to not really adhere to those social etiquette as strongly
Hmm.
because of that filter. Oh, you're not
Yeah.
really there. Oh, I could potentially just do something, I could do other things I wouldn't normally do. It's 'cause you're not really there. I don't really feel you're here. And so what's interesting is that for people to break off of conversations, it's actually easier online to break
Hmm.
off. And it's
That
easier to
makes
say,
sense.
"Hey, I'm just gonna talk to." It's easier. Hey, I'm just gonna pop around and just hop around and just talk to other people. But if you said that at like a physical event, and hey, I'm gonna like it would. It's exactly the same words, Jason, but people have an easier time saying it and accepting it online, and saying, "Hey, I want to pop over to this other table." Because our product, like, and I'm not trying to sell here. I'm just trying to explain how it's
Yeah.
relevant to this conversation. Is like we have different tables, and people can jump from one table to the next just by double clicking on that table. And there's like circles of people and their little faces and stuff like that. And it looks like kind of like a game. So when it's easy for people to just jump over. And what's so funny is that, and this is kind of a side topic, because of this filter, introverts, we hosted some events that helped introverts for their careers and like how to,
Hmm.
you know, how, how to how to make sure that you can progress in your career as an introvert. And a lot of introverts said that our format, because of this invisible, what I'm calling this invisible filter, um, they don't feel as introverted. They feel they can speak a little bit more a little bit more, and it's just more comfortable for them to speak. Um, in some cases. And so that to me is extremely interesting because they don't they're not as anxious,
Is it
that
so?
anxiety that they would typically get, they don't get.
Is it more comfortable for them to speak because they can jump to another table because they have choice?
It's it's because well, number one is choice, and number two is they don't feel as anxious because they don't feel you. They don't. There's not that nervousness.
Hmm.
So then they're like, yeah, um, I'm not as anxious because you're not exactly here. I don't feel as easily embarrassed or whatever. If I
Okay,
mess up like online, people are just like, yeah, it's okay. Like they just don't feel that embarrassment as bad as
right.
you would at an offline like in person situation.
Right. They don't feel the weight of the social responsibility. I went to an event,
Yeah.
a networking event for entrepreneurs. There were a bunch of people were pitching their businesses, and I was there just listening to their pitches. And there was a there was a startup at the time, and I don't remember what they're called, but they had based on questions that you answered as part of the registration process, they put you um, into a filtration matching system, and everybody got these little badges or these little electronic tags that you would carry around on a lanyard. And during the networking time, it would use proximity as well as interests to
That's cool.
pair you up, and then over
That's pretty cool.
and and so you'd be sitting there talking with somebody, and it would like show your sign
Mm, mm,
on
mm.
their little badge thing, and that told you I should go talk to you. I don't know what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm not sure where the system thought we should connect, but the goal is to figure that out. And then when it was time to jump, I don't know, we got like 5 minutes together at a time. It would then show everybody's badges would start blinking, and it would then identify somebody around you who you were then supposed to talk with. And it did all this in real time based on some sort of matching algorithm and
Right.
some level of interest. It seemed that opened up the whole room because it forced people to mingle, and it took the decision making out of should I go talk to somebody.
Mm,
It said,
yeah.
here's the person you should speak with. It's your job to go have the conversation, figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah. Go figure it out. Yeah. Go figure it out yourself.
Yeah, and then at the end, you
That's
got a
pretty cool.
list of all the people that you talked with and the points of
Oh, that's pretty
connection
cool.
that the system thought that you should, or should have connected on.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Like, I think those are like really interesting to see. Yeah. It's just very interesting to see if like how the algorithms and how they can do that. And I think it's probably better than you just randomly looking at someone and looking at what they look like
A lot of people
versus,
can't do that.
you know,
I mean, like me,
yeah,
I'm having a conversation with you. You're in Hong Kong, and who knew that you grew up in Illinois? Like I don't know you. We met each other, less than an hour ago now, and I'm willing to have a conversation with a
yeah,
complete stranger, just going through
yeah,
some sort of, clicking process, and you sign up, and we have this conversation. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody's comfortable in that space,
yeah, I agree.
wants to do that, can have a conversation there. And I think that it's those barriers, particularly like you talked about for introverts, those barriers for introverts where I'm actually an introvert too. I'm kind of an ambivert. I've learned to be, more of an extrovert. Um, but not everybody can get over that activation
Oh,
energy
yeah,
to get into the conversation. And it sounds to me like what you're doing and what that startup did for in-person events, you're doing for online events to enable people to connect in a more free-form environment rather than just being locked into 15 people on a Zoom call, and then all of a sudden you're like, and video off, and I'm gonna go,
yeah,
tinker
exactly.
around in the other room while I'm kind of sort of listening in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's like the worst thing, which is it's not engaging. And
Yeah.
and I always go back to like, okay, what would we have done in the absence of technology?
Hmm.
And I did a lot of like research in terms of like understanding how people organize gatherings and organize events. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people, when they organize events, it usually frequently breaks out into small groups, very frequently, almost all the time. Like having a long speaking event and just having large groups is not a thing. So why are we making it a thing on Zoom? That's like, to me, like the disconnect. And I'll share with you like the story that I kind of during my research, like which really fascinates me. So, when I was when I was in Illinois, of course I had really great friends. They took me to like these mega churches, and like I remember going to mega churches when I was young, and like how huge and massive they were. Then I came back to Hong Kong, I haven't been to any mega churches or anything recently. But then I started asking, pastors, and I started talking to them and saying, hey, how do you guys organize such a humongous community, um, and organize events and human interactions for 10,000 people? And how do people come back again week after week, week after week? And um, and when I started like learning more about what they do, so there's one mega church that I was talking to that's in the Midwest, and what they do is that the Sunday Mass, and maybe everyone here knows this, but I did not. But the Sunday Mass is actually the tip of the iceberg. Like people thought that, oh, the Sunday Mass is like where everyone gets together and that's where all the magic happens, blah blah blah. And they're like, no, that's actually not true. They have these weekly, like small group meetings throughout the week, and it's always the same people, between 6 and 10 people. It's always the
Mm.
same group of people. Essentially, it was a mastermind. It's a religious mastermind. And
Mhm.
they would have it every single week, and they would come back and talk. And what was interesting, this really blew my mind, is the leader of that group would be given this book, and this book would be like the 40 days of purpose, for example. And it
Mhm.
was literally a playbook that they would walk through. Okay, first meeting, you talk about this. Second meeting, you talk about this. Third meeting, and it was a playbook for that. Obviously, like talked about most common challenges that people have in life, and that's how they connected. That's how they bind. That's how they created this small group amongst this much larger community of 10,000 people. And when I realized that in the absence of technology, what people have been doing for centuries, that small group interaction is really the bread and butter of how human people really do that. And technology has moved sort of away from that, or it's trying to interpret it on its own. It's doing something a little bit different. And so that's how I feel like, how do we get back to the original way that we've been practicing for like thousands of years? What's the original way that we do it in the absence of technology? Because clearly it's working, because we've been doing it for thousands of years.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is working. That's it's an interesting journey to be on, to come to that insight of how do you maintain a group of 10,000 people who come there on a Sunday. The It seems to me that part of the goal, or part of the draw, in let's say a mega church scenario, is the ability to remain anonymous. There's a good number of people who will never go to those small groups, no matter how many of those small groups are going on, around how many interests. However, at the core of each one of us is a desire to be known and to know someone else on a more intimate level. And so to take a wide or a large group structure, allow you to come in anonymously, but to not also recognize the need for you to connect more intimately, it becomes void of purpose over time. It's like, okay, I keep coming to this thing, and it's like, yeah, but nobody knows me, and
Right.
so I could actually disappear, and
Right.
no one would care,
Wouldn't
which is
matter. Yeah.
which is an innate
Yeah.
fear of most of us, that I could disappear and no one would
Right.
care. They
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the fast track to depression and suicide. And
Right.
so if you're going to connect people, be it in a corporate world or in a Zoom meetings or whatever, certainly in churches, there's got to be a way to be known, and that can only be done in small groups. And the
Exactly.
smaller the group, more likely
Precisely.
the more close you'll be known, and that has permanence to it. That's a more permanent relationship out of which you can grow a strong, larger group, but you can't do the other. It's not a you can't expect close relationships in large groups. They only
Yeah.
develop in small groups.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. And I think that's a basic anthropological like social structure that I think as humans that we just have. And um you know I think it's just a basic building block. You can't it's difficult to go anything beyond. We have niche, like we have like what's the word? It's not a niche, it's cliques. Yeah, social cliques, right? In high school, or you have your close friends, that they would call it close friends when you're an adult, I guess. Close friends, like you have to it's just in circles, like it's the rings of your social circles, which are really rings. And I think that's like pretty important. Like I think that you're right. That is what's key for that. And some of these mega churches, I think, are whether it's a mega church or a normal church, like they're very successful in being able to train and get these leaders to have great small group interaction with people that talk about things that matter, that they can bond with. And masterminds are essentially the same concept,
Hmm.
which it was pretty interesting. Like I think that was really interesting for me, that masterminds are essentially like kind of like based off the same concept. It's just the topic is different.
Yeah, I think that's true. I wonder, touching on this idea of matching people or matching algorithms, and then computers are really good at doing that. People are reasonably good at filtering out other people like them. I wonder if there's an opportunity, or should there be some sort of push into helping people connect with people who are not like them, because otherwise we end
Mm,
up in an echo
yeah,
chamber of people who are just like us, which is not a way to live
exactly.
a good life. You've
100%.
traveled a bit, and we at the beginning started talking about small talk, and how small talk in an elevator in the United States is almost like the norm, because it's so awkward to
Yeah.
stand there with people that you don't know for what, 20 seconds. uh
Yeah.
but you go to Hong Kong and people be like, what is this dude talking about? Can we not just be quiet? the We
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
cultural norms that, if we understood those cultural norms, if we had to deliberately connect with people who are not like us, what could we learn about ourselves, and what could we learn about other people, and connect in ways that we would never want to, unless we were sort of thrust into it. How does your platform and where do your thoughts go into to that type of connection?
Um, so just to clarify, like your question is like, um, how do we make more meaningful connections um, through small groups and maybe using small talk? Is that your? I just want to
I'm
make sure I
wondering, how do
understand
we
the
connect
question.
with people who are not like us? Because all the
Okay.
algorithms, everybody
Yeah.
focuses
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
people who are like you. If you go to the mega church, it's
Okay.
going to be like,
Yeah.
here, are you a this, or are you that? Go to that group. And that's
Right.
that's
Right. Right.
valuable, right? Finding
That makes
finding
sense. Yeah.
similarities. But what about all the why do we not deliberately connect on dissimilarities?
Got it. Got it. So the good thing about virtual events, and if you know, serendipitous encounters is basically what a lot of like what our product does. We don't necessarily have a lot of these planned sort of like algorithmic matching. Is that you
Okay.
you let the collisions happen naturally. And I think there's a time and place for very structured algorithmic matching, but I also think that there's a time and place for things that are just by luck. Because at the end of the day, like the joy of being human is the unpredictability of it, right?
Hmm.
That you you're just living through life, that things can happen. If everything was predictable, then I don't know if you've watched Netflix enough, but if you watch Netflix enough, and Netflix just recommends you the same thing over and over and over again, life just becomes really boring. Like I
Mhm.
watch crime, like my wife loves watching crime drama, and we're watching crime drama for like a whole month, and I feel depressed that I'm like reading about another serial killer. Like, and how they became a serial killer. And I was like, okay, well, I know like pretty much like, you know, then I don't know if you ever had that feeling, but it just becomes really like it just becomes very, I don't know what the word is. It's not dry, it's not boring. It's just not that
I
exciting for some reason when you just,
I did. I
I
had
don't know
that
if you,
feeling just today. In fact, I was scrolling through TikTok, and it's sort of become a virtue and a vice in some ways. I started putting content out on TikTok just to, ideally make the world a better place as I see it. But I was scrolling through TikTok, and in this long thing, it was way too damn long for one, but it was this sweet video about how guy returns from military service and his girlfriend had waited for him for so long and he's going to propose and how does it turn out? And it's so beautiful and she didn't expect him. And I was just like, oh my God, gag me. I know how this turns out. She's thrilled. She's happy. She cries. He cries. It's just like, it happens the same way every time. And I was just like, I don't need to see this. I don't need to watch this. TikTok, move along, move along. Because it's like one of those things like to your idea of like crime dramas. It's like you seen one, like, oh my gosh, serial killer next door. I wonder how this turns out. It's just
yeah,
like
exactly.
don't need to see it again. Turns out poorly.
And here's something interesting, which I realize is that like, why is it that when I watch Netflix, some of the best recommendations come from friends or online, just like you reading a newspaper or a critic? Because
Yeah.
if the algorithm is a successful algorithm, you would
Mm.
not need that. You wouldn't need anyone else to recommend you, and you be able to find, I don't know, maybe you like Tiger King or something. Like I really love Tiger King. I thought this like I was like
I
nothing I've
liked
ever
it
seen before.
too.
It's
I admit.
crazy. It was so crazy that I liked it. And I'm like, Tik it would have never Netflix would have never recommended me Tiger King. Why? Because it's new, it's different, it's a new trend. It's not been done before. Like, and I think algorithms don't know how to do that. They don't know how to. So like the definition of a machine learning algorithm is this. This is how they make them. I don't know. This is how they make a machine learning algorithm. This is what they do. They take a whole bunch of data that's already there. It's already there. They shove it into the machine, and then the machine then creates a mental model from that data. So what that means is you're essentially creating something from the past history to predict something in the future that the model has seen before.
Hmm.
Now that's key, because what that means is that it has no ability to predict on something that it has never seen before. It's never seen Tiger King. It would not recommend that to me because it'd be like, what is this thing? I have no idea. So there's these new trends. Like life is all about these new trends, these new things, like the whole freshness of it. And sometimes I feel like algorithms are not very good at that. They're
Hmm.
very good at other things. And I think there's a time and place for algorithms for social interactions. But like and I think it's a really great idea. And I think it should definitely there's a lot of use cases for it. But I think there's also a lot of joy in the serendipity of life. And when technology is so predictable, technology has become made our lives so predictable, so much noise, so much stuff that to be human is to have that serendipity almost in a strange way.
Yeah.
I feel like.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that computers, and I've spent a long time in the computer world, and I wrote some algorithms through my time.
Oh, really?
Uh, yeah,
Okay.
and so I know exactly what you're talking about. Um, the unpredictable nature of people is interesting because on a whole, people are very predictable. On a micro, so
Mm,
on the macro, people are very predictable, but on a micro, people are super unpredictable, which is it feels like an
mm,
oxymoron, but
right.
the randomness or seeming randomness of people's lives can really dramatically affect their needs or their wants in that moment. Over time,
Interesting.
they become very predictable. But and if it weren't for that predictable nature of the corporations have a terrible time planning profit next quarter. but the fact of the matter is they can, and they can predict seasonality of
Right.
product sales. But the
Yep.
individual, will that individual person buy in that next quarter? Who the hell knows?
Yeah. No one knows. Yeah.
Because because they don't know that the child went off to school, and so everybody's clamping down on expenses, and then nobody knew that because it wasn't
Right.
exposed to the algorithm. To your point, and how would an algorithm take all of these nuances into play? And that's, I mean, to your point about how Friends can make a great movie recommendation. People take these nuances under advisement intuitively. We don't even know we're processing this nuance in a person's life. It just happens. And then we go, oh, hey, you know what what movie you should watch. It's out of the nuance of our understanding of a person in that moment that there's no way a computer can predict that with any certainty. Although Google's trying to do a really good job because they know so much about us. But so wrap all this stuff up into our the original thought, and also what you're working on, reclaiming authenticity in our online interactions. We've talked about a range of things in the past hour. How do you wrap all this back into how do we reclaim authentic interactions, or authenticity, or authentic, meaningful relationships in online interactions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about small group interaction. If you find yourself on an online Zoom call, and it's just a whole bunch of people, um, it's not you, it's human nature to feel certain things that it's a bit odd, and why it's kind of, hold on, sorry, wait, needed to be like somewhat not authentic, and and I think like those are all natural things, and so um, it's important to kind of like make the most out of those like online interactions to break off into smaller engagements. And if you are an organizer, you should always keep that in mind. Like you should always keep that in mind that we can't have a 10-15 group, you know, conversation needs to be broken up. And so us at Remo, that is what we care about. We care about how do we create those small conversations through the use of our platform, in order to create those authentic conversations. And that's what that is basically our bread and butter, and that's what we care about. But in general, like it's unfortunately it takes a little bit more effort online. So that's the bad thing about online compared to in person. In person is all natural; things just flow. You know, online is something where like we're not used to it still, and just takes more effort to make a good experience. um
Mm-hmm.
and so personally I think it's just like learning a new skill. Instead of playing the guitar, you're playing the violin. It's the same instrument, it's the same thing. We're playing the same sheet of music, but you're using a different instrument to do it. So we
Yeah.
just haven't learned how to do that yet very well online. It's just slightly different rules. But learning those rules can create really great experiences, for yourself and for others.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Good wrap up, man.
Thank
Well,
you.
this has been Coffee with Humans with my new friend Hoyin. It's been a really fascinating conversation about authentic relationships and how do we exist in this virtual world. And you and I are disconnected by thousands of miles at this point in time, but through the use of technology, and I think which is going to be pervasive, and a structural change in how we communicate for most everybody now. We can connect through this online platform. So people can get in contact with you at your LinkedIn address, and then remo.co.
Yeah,
Okay.
remote.co is the website. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Well, cool, man. Thanks so much for being on Coffee with Humans. It's really my pleasure to get to know you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Well, to all of our viewers and listeners, Coffee with Humans are live interactions between strangers who become friends. Hoyin and I met a little bit over an hour ago, and you were invited to our conversation, streamed around the world, get in contact with Hoyin at remo.co, and we will catch you next time. Subscribe and share on YouTube. We also stream on LinkedIn, Twitch, Facebook, and more, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for coming.
One of the things I love about Coffee with Humans are the raw conversations I get to have, meeting new people just like you. If you or someone you know should be on Coffee with Humans, go to coffeewithhumans.com. Remember, the only rule is no sales calls.
This has been Coffee with Humans. Subscribe to get updates or click to have coffee with me. coffeewithhumans.com.